If you want to pitch your startup properly, there are certain principles you need to keep in mind because, see, the thing is, your audience actually can be composite. You can have diverse audience members. You can have investors. You can have customers. You can have stakeholders. You can have a lot of participants who are interested in your product or service. But you got to know how to pitch to them properly. So, in today's conversation, I really want to talk to you about that. How do you actually multiply your sales potential or your funding potential by 10x, 15x, 20x? First thing first, you got to know your audience. If you want to pitch your startup properly, you got to really know your audience. As I said a little earlier, audience members are different. And when I speak about knowing your audience members, I'm speaking about the psychographics of your audience. In other words, you got to think about the psychology of your audience members, the geography of your audience members, but also the demographics. The way you pitch to, let's say, an investor in Nigeria is not the same way you pitch to an investor in Dallas, okay? So that's important. So geography plays an important role. The psychology, when you're pitching to young investors versus, let's say, middle-aged investors, you have different demographics. So that's really important. You know your audience better than anybody else. So you got to really have a clear idea about what really resonates with your audience. You always want to put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving your pitch, right? If you were to be pitched on by someone else, how would you react? So you have to really understand that your investors are generally well educated, savvy about startups, and sharp about business. Otherwise, they wouldn't be where they are at right now. So they want to like you. They want to really understand you. They want to resonate with you. So you have to know your audience pretty well. The second thing is you need to really sell yourself in your team. So the thing is, it's not just about selling your product or service, but you have to sell the foundation, the human foundation behind the whole idea. You have to sell your team. You have to sell your business model. You have to sell the profiles, the different profiles that are in your team, right? So your team is pretty composite. Your team is pretty varied. So you have to have a way to connect with your investors at an emotional level, at a personal level, at a human level. So it's not just about closing the deal. It's about closing the deal not only at the transactional level, but you have to close the deal at the personal level. You have to close the deal with what I call at the chemical level. In other words, you got to really think about having chemistry. I'm not thinking about you dating an investor, but chemistry has to be there. Your message has to resonate with them. They have to like your story. They have to like your profile. So if you want to pitch your startup appropriately, I want you to really think about you have to get into the nitty gritty. You have to communicate concrete details. It's not just about blah, 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 just having a nice story, blah, blah, blah. No, no, no. You got to go into the details and be very specific. You have to communicate concrete details about everything. Details about everything. About the product, about the market, about your potential customers, about the trends in your industry. That way, you are building a knowledge layer. You are telling your investor that you know what you're talking about. You are pretty knowledgeable about your product, about your service, about your industry, about your competitors, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's really what the granularity actually conveys. The more detailed you are, the better the investors, the better idea, or the let's say the most likely those investors will want to listen to you, at least listen to you, and see if if your idea has some potential. Okay, so communicate concrete details. You want to include a concise description, for example, of what exactly you are building and who should use it. So you have to really be clear about your MVP, your most valuable product. So you have to really pay attention to anything that really is going to be memorable, is going to be significant 1 year from now, 1 month from now, 10 years from now. Okay. One thing for sure, the pitch has to be very strong. Your pitch has to be strong, but please, I want you to stay away from very lengthy pitches. Of course, I'm speaking here about granularity. I'm speaking about communicating concrete details. I'm speaking about connecting with audience members at the very granular level, but please don't bombard them with so many details. Okay, you want to be as concise and sharp as possible. It's all about if you really know your product pretty well, if you know your audience pretty well, you know what they want to hear. You know what they're there for. Because before you ask for the numbers, for your numbers, for the funds that you want, you have to deliver. Not deliver in terms of showing them the traction in the market if there's none, but you have to be able to have a convincing storytelling process. So if you want to pitch your startup properly, I want you to really think about the market. And by market, I'm talking about the attractiveness of the market. It's not just about the size. A lot of experts, the other day I was listening to a CNN Money, and experts were talking about the size of the market. Listen, if you have a large market, but the market is not attractive enough from a monetary perspective, it's not really interesting. In contrast, you can have a very small market, but it's highly monetizable, right? If you have a small market in a niche industry and you can make money consistently, it's just a lot better. So you want to target an attractive market, okay? I'm not saying what experts are saying in terms of the size of the market is actually wrong, but you have to have the right fit between size and attractiveness. Investors are optimists, right? They will project success for your business and try to envision what the success case looks like. So, a company whose success case is too small can be an excellent business, but a poor investment. Because, listen, investors have to think about their ROI too, okay? So, venture investors are looking for instance, looking for companies that can sustain revenues of hundreds of millions of dollars per year, minimum. I want to insist on that, okay? So niche products where the ceiling is millions of dollars are only interesting to the extent that they unlock adjacent bigger markets. So if you're thinking about that, I want you to think about not only your core industry, your core niche, your core field, but also think about adjacent. Think about neighboring, quote unquote, neighboring markets where you can really pivot and really make money, right? It's all about having a scalable business model. So if you focus too much on a small industry, on a small market, and you can't pivot into an adjacent industry over time, you're going to really disappear real fast because out there you have a very competitive industry, very competitive world. And nowadays, depending on the industry you're in, you might even be having rivals who are not even in the states. You might be in let's say in Chicago, but have rivals in China, having rivals in Johannesburg, having rivals in Australia. I mean, it really depends. Okay, so we are really talking about a global market, so you have to look at things at that level. So one thing I want you to really think about if you want to pitch your startup properly, let's say you are in different industries, right? You are in different geographies. You are actually addressing multiple demographics. You have to share unique insight. What's really going to differentiate you from your next door opponent, next door rival, is the intel that you have. So if you really think about, let's say you're addressing a problem, but you are addressing a problem from your point of view. You are addressing a problem from your specific insight, from your specific vantage point, right? So you want to share with investors, you want to share with your like other stakeholders, unique insights. Insights that are unique to you, they are peculiar to your vantage point. This is how you actually can win over actually some investors, especially the hardcore VC firms. Okay, so doing a startup means you are going to spend several years learning every nook and cranny of a problem space, right? You should already be thinking about this problem in detail and doing your research, both in reading voraciously and in talking to potential customers. I mean, this is really what I was telling you a little earlier when I said you have to demonstrate thought leadership on the specific problem. And sometimes you can even see when you have startup pitches, investors are pretty peculiar about that. I mean, on a show on a recent U.S. Shark Tank show, you probably saw how shark investors were really interested in knowing if the entrepreneur had unique insights about the market he or she was talking about. So that was really important because investors want to make sure they're putting their money to good use. Okay, so if you make it, you want to make it obvious to your reviewer that you have already started this work, that you know a lot more, that you know exactly what's really happening in the industry. Okay, and you also want to make sure that you are actually backing up whatever you're saying with facts. Okay, it's important to build your case with actual facts. Don't make up numbers. Don't make up stuff. If you know a number, say it. Restate vague sentences with specific facts. So, sharing facts that an investor doesn't know is actually the easiest way to establish mastery of any subject. So, your unique insights is actually 10x or 20x more powerful, if you will, when you share the facts that led to it. It's one of those things where you always have to contextualize your knowledge. So if you want to pitch your startup properly this year, let's say you are, and again, what I'm telling you, it's actually regardless of the industry you're in, you want to focus on nascent greatness. What does that mean? That means that sometimes when you see a market, you don't see greatness right away. In other words, you don't see prosperity right away. You don't see the potential right away. But you, based on your unique insight, know there is latent potential, latent greatness, nascent greatness. Okay. There are many great businesses in the world that are not great startups. People who make equity investments in startups do so because they believe there is a small chance that the company grows to be massive, okay? So that's one of those things you have to think about it. Investors remember that, like at the beginning, current giants of the industry such as Google and Facebook, they looked like small players in their earliest days. It was not typically like a well-rounded business run by a competent operator that was doing pretty much everything acceptably. So the huge companies of today looked like they were shoestring operations doing almost everything wrong, run actually by very unlikely people. But they had a little seed that was just irresistible, right? It's one of those things where you have to understand that you have to have the passion. You have to also think about nascent greatness. That's what I was talking about. Nascent greatness. Okay. So many pitches look like business plans, but business plans as an institution cannot decide to optimize for breadth or depth, and so you want to optimize for shallow verbosity. In other words, you have a very think about it this way. You have very limited bandwidth. So if you want to really focus on nascent greatness, you want to focus on the things that are going right. The things that are going right. Maybe you have a good team. Maybe you have a good niche, and you want to expand that niche. You want to enlarge that niche. Okay, and that's going to help you over time. If you want to pitch your startup properly this year, what I want you to do right now is to highlight evidence of success. And again, I don't care if you are in a niche that is overcrowded or that's crowded, or a niche that is actually pretty empty, if you will. Even though there's no such a thing as an empty niche. What I want you to really understand is that by highlighting evidence of success, you are really piggybacking on things that have worked already. If you have a customer testimonials, you can really have them, not a problem. It's all about showing investors that your whole idea is not a shallow enterprise. There is something solid into it. And what I want to say here is that you have to understand that highlighting evidence of success can also bring more confidence to investors. Okay. One thing for sure, there are 3 hurdles regarding your metrics. Do you know what you should be tracking? Are you actually tracking it? And are the numbers you have exceptionally good relative to the amount of time you have been working, right? It's one of those things where you have to really understand. You have to understand the relative, opacity that really starts at the beginning of startup operations. But later on, that opacity becomes more, let's say, quote unquote, transparent. So you should know the common metrics that startups in your industry or that your business model are judged by. You want to really pay attention to things, and again, things are different from one industry to another, actually. So, for instance, if you are in the SaaS space, like software as a service space, you have a different metric as if you are an online business. If you are an ad supported website, for instance, you have different KPIs. So, those are important elements to think about, okay? And well, one thing I want to say here is that it's not just about your size, it's about the traction, it's about the momentum, okay? So when I speak about highlighting evidence of success, it's about those things I want you to really focus on. I want you to focus on traction. I want you to focus on momentum. I want you to focus on agility, or what I call business agility, business model agility. In other words, how fast you are growing, okay? And also, one thing I want to say also is that you don't need every number to be stunning, but there should be some evidence that you have something working and special. Okay, that's really important because that's going to fuel investor interest, at least at the in the very early days. Okay, it's one of those things where again I want to make sure that you do not actually don't actually make up any numbers. If you're citing metrics, you want to cite metrics correctly, especially revenue. Okay, do not cite gross merchandise volume, for example, as revenue. If you facilitate a transaction between two parties and collect a fee, then the total transaction is GMV, but only your cut is revenue, right? So that's really important. Do not cite I'm just giving you an example because a lot of startups like to really inflate numbers to actually attract investors. You do not want to do that because investors sooner or later they're going to find out. Investors are pretty smart people, and they will find out. And when they find out, you do not want them to really, start naming you names, actually. Okay, if you want to pitch your startup properly this year, I want you to ship a compelling prototype. So include a prototype if possible. And the cool thing is that prototypes demonstrate the ability to ship working products, working service, or working software, for instance. For instance, many fewer early stage entrepreneurs than you would expect can successfully ship actually working products. And that's one of those things where you have to really think about deeply. Remember, you only get 5 minutes maximum, 5 minute tops, but on average you get 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, and so you might get as many as 5 or 10 if your written pitch suggests that your company is likely quite interesting. This is not enough time to evaluate an entire product, but hey, listen, this is what it is. You have to use what you can, right? It's all about soliciting. It's all about eliciting interest from the get-go in a very short amount of time. And that's number 8. Ship a compelling prototype. Number 9, I want you to have fun, but calibrate very well. Have fun because at the end of the day, whether you get funded or not, you got to really feel passionate about what you're doing. Otherwise, you might as well just do something else, okay? So many pitches have a sense of humor, optimism, and the joy for life in them. You want to have that. This is a good thing. Think about it because you want to really instill faith in your project, but also instill interest in your project. Now, this is a good thing. The passion thing, the joy thing is a good thing if you have it naturally in you. Don't feel the need to make your writing more stilted simply because that would sound more professional. If you're not naturally blessed with the gift of gab, you can work on your storytelling later. Just write the facts like you would describe them to a smart friend, okay? And finally, you want to get an introduction if it would be great. In other words, if you're able to be introduced to a VC firm, like you don't need an intro to apply to Y Combinator, for instance. I mean, I just finished the video on Y Combinator, but when it comes to other VC firms, you might need to have some introduction. That's very important. So if you're able to get some introduction, hey, listen, I want you to really hop on that anyway. Hop on it on any time. So here's the takeaway. In today's conversation, I explained to you how to pitch your startup properly. I talked to you about knowing your audience, selling yourself and your team, communicating concrete details, targeting an attractive market, sharing unique insights, focusing on nascent greatness. That's important from a scalability point of view. Highlighting evidence of success, shipping a compelling prototype, having fun but calibrating pretty well, and getting an introduction if that will be great for your business model. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.